On behalf of our Executive Director, Pam Miner, and the Board of Directors, I'd like to welcome you to our Historical Museum and Village and to this very special Twilight Talk. We are absolutely thrilled. We have new equipment, which we are just testing out. You are the first audience, and so that's very exciting. A couple of housekeeping things. If you need to use a restroom, right around the corner in the room marked private, you can find a restroom. We do have water bottles out there and there are treats, so even though it's right before dinner, please feel free to help yourselves. I'd like to tell you about a couple of upcoming events on Luminary, and Sanibel's Luminary, you know, is not to be missed. On December 5th from 3 to 5, we will have a Cracker Christmas here. That's before the official Luminary starts. We'll be decorated, there will be carolers, and we will have, I'll introduce her in a minute, but this woman on my left, and we will have copies of Sanibel's story, the definitive book of Sanibel history, loaded with incredible photographs. It has been reissued by the Museum and Village in honor of the city's 50th and our museum's 40th anniversaries. And that will be available. If you know someone who loves Sanibel, give them the gift of her history because it's pretty special. Also upcoming after Luminary on December 16th in this room, and you're surrounded by beautiful images and sad images of our lighthouse, we will be showing the documentary Secrets and Stories of the Sanibel Lighthouse. We have the videographer who created that work here in the audience today, and he will be at that event. If you haven't seen it, it's a must-see. If you've already seen it, it's a heartbreaker, so it would be a good, pre-Christmas event. Then on January 20th, we will have a Twilight Talk in here. We've invited an author and I will introduce our executive director. Okay. Okay. On the 20th, in this room, and there will be publicity on our website, and there will be tickets available on our website. We have invited the author of the Rutland Mule Matter. There is a U.S. Marshal's file about a family, last name Rutland, who after the freeze of 1894-95 moved to Sanibel. We have a Rutland house here. He has written a book about the family and their history. It's absolutely fascinating. We will soon have that available in our gift store and in our gift shop. And so that is another thing. Again, lovely gifts for any of the readers who you know. Okay, Ms. Pam, do you want to say hello to this group? Okay. What did she say?
Camera.
Oh, she's getting a camera, okay. Okay. It has been said that cemeteries are for the living because the dead have already moved on. And that is absolutely true. Today, it's our privilege and pleasure to honor the lives and stories of Sanibel settlers who now are resting eternally in the sands of time here on our island. And technically, now,
it's the hologram.
That may have sat there a little too long.
That's new equipment.
Or it may need to be turned on. Okay. All right, we will be talking about cemeteries, graveyards, family plots, and unidentified souls. Deb, do you want to show them the locations that we're going to be talking about?
All right. Well, I was hired to be the Vanna White of cemeteries. This is the Rutland graves here, and we don't know their exact locations. We know it's a memorial to the two people there. And many of you that ride bikes on the island know this to be the Sanibel Cemetery.
Is it Algiers?
Yes, it's just off of Algiers and Middle Gulf. Yes. It actually has two sections to it we'll talk about later. And this here is the Nut Cemetery, which is a private property, and it's on our historic register, but it's not anything that we want you to access at this time. They are going to allow us time, possibly in the future, that it would be open for people to look at. And is this the skulls?
Yeah,
This is the Ellis Homestead. And this is a historic site that actually got us quite a bit of acclaim back in the 1890s.
1890.
Yeah. And I'm not covering that one, thank goodness. And this is a gravesite for Oliver Bowen. And if you're a member of SCCF, that's all part of what they're working with up there. And then finally, this is a cemetery that very few of us know about. It is the Wolfert Cemetery, and it actually is the only cemetery on Sanibel that is dedicated. The rest of them were just property donated by families and that sort of thing. But this is donated, and it's literally a jungle, but we'll talk about that later.
And I need to stop hitting my microphone. I need to introduce these folks who are here. And on my immediate left, Betty Anholt is widely acknowledged as the Sanibel historian. She is the author of 10 books, numerous awards. She knows the history from earliest history up until right now. In 1969, her husband Jim and her kids, and where are you, Cameron? Her son Cameron is in the audience, moved to Sanibel and quickly became fixtures in the community. The gas station on the corner, as you come into town, for many years they operated. Right near that was Elsie Malone's Specimen Shells, and Betty was an expert there. She also did quite a stint as, you were bookkeeper, right, at the bait box?
Yeah, did a wide variety of things.
You were scooping.
Dipping shrimp in orange.
Okay. But probably most importantly, if you look at her necklace, she and her husband Jim had adventures in paradise, the trolley.
No.
Not adventures. Okay, see, correct, okay. The trolley.
Sanibel trolley.
Sanibel trolley,
Yeah.
which
Big red trolley.
which went to as far as Miami, and you did tours all over the island.
Yeah.
Sanibel trolley, I always thought it was adventures. She has worked at the library for a number of years. She is a fixture there. If anyone ever has questions about something, Betty is our go-to person. She has loved and fully embraced this island for over 50 years. So sitting next to her is, and I'm very awed to be in their company. Sitting next to her is Deb Gleason, whose family came here in 1958, and I believe her twin brother is sitting in the audience as well. Deb described herself as being a wild child. I'm not sure if that's true. She said she tore all over the island on her bicycle. Later in the talk, she will talk about the ghost grave, which was, lore of the children on the island. For over 20 years, she has served as the chair of the city's Historic Preservation Commission. She knows everything. And to listen to her and Betty talk is just a treat. The rabbit holes they have gone down as we have been talking about this island history is just exceptional. I do want to add one thing for our videographer, Ken Sneeden, who is in the audience. Ken, have you ever read anything or heard anyone say anything even slightly negative about Esperanza Woodring?
Not yet.
Okay, so imagine an adolescent girl.
Except for Deb.
Yeah. An adolescent girl.
Deb didn't like her grits.
That's, okay, you're stealing my line. Okay. Esperanza was doing childcare while their parents were on a short trip. Adolescent Deb, and we all know girls, and she said famously, "Don't expect me to eat your grits." So, anyway, we are thrilled to be doing this presentation for you. How many of you remember the first time you encountered that cemetery? And how many of you have seen visitors come upon it the first time? It's right in the middle of the bike path, in the middle of Florida's fauna and flora. There is this sacred space. Today's Sanibel Resort was the site of Sanibel's first graveyard and our best known cemetery. And telling us about the Sanibel Pioneer Cemetery will be Betty Anholt. So Betty?
Okay, so this is the Reverend George Barnes and his wife, Jane or Jean, and relaxing by a sea grape. The Barnes family, the entire family, including 3 children, traveled the world before they ended up here on our island. And he was not only an evangelist in the United States, but he started out by being a missionary to India for 7 years. They encountered rebellions, and 2 of their children were born in India. And when he got sick, they returned to Kentucky, which was their home state. And he ran a church there. Then he became what they called a mountain evangelist for some 20 years, basically tent revival sort of thing, which I'm sure you're familiar with that concept. And then they did another world tour, and they ended up at Punta Gorda, got on a sailboat. They were heading further south, and I don't know if they were going to Key West or to Havana, but they got hung up on low tide off of Sanibel and heard that the island had just opened to homesteading. So the Reverend and his wife and each of their 3 children each took out a homestead plot of 160 acres each, and they butted them all together. So they owned, once the patent was cleared, 1 square mile of this island. He never retired from his religious endeavors, and they built a church there. We'll talk a little bit about that later. I think, do the next slide. Yeah. There's the church. This was built right on the Gulf of Mexico.
Sorry.
And as you can see, it's fairly tall. It actually is said to have held 300 people. That's pretty impressive when you consider, especially that in 1895, when it was built, there probably weren't more than 100 people on this island. There were stained glass windows up there in the top. The cross at the very top was said to draw in sailors from far ashore. And it was built kind of in that Oriental style. Go ahead. The church was built in honor of this little baby who was born and died in 1893. He was the Reverend's grandson, named after him, baby George. Gerber baby.
Sure.
Okay. And this is another shot, obviously, of the church. You can see that there is some graves being placed around the church. The graveyard actually was from the church area and extended up into what we consider now as the Sanibel Pioneer Cemetery. However, in 1913, which was after the Barneses had passed away and had been buried in their cemetery here on Sanibel, part of the cemetery itself had been sold, and so they dug up the coffins and sent them all to Kentucky. These girls or some other girls were sitting at Thistle Lodge, this building here, which some of you may remember existed until 1978. They sat playing cards on the porch and watched coffins being loaded into a truck and being taken to Kentucky.
The next one.
Yeah. So this is the gravesite today of the Reverend George and his wife in Danville, Kentucky.
Okay, and Deb, do you want to can you show them the north and south ridges up there?
I don't think it's really obvious.
It's not real clear.
No, it's not. But there are ridges here, and the one that we ride our bikes by is, of course, the South Ridge, and then there's a North Ridge. And when we were kids, we would, of course, have to go to the cemetery. But when we got to be teenagers, my brother doesn't remember this, but we would go at night because we could see in the distance a headstone, a tombstone. But we never could find it during the day. Nowadays, there are pathways that go through this area. So you're not going to be able to find it either, because I just went recently to find it, and I think maybe Hurricane Ian may have toppled it because I can't find it now. But I did find it probably 2 years prior to Ian. And if any of you know Dave DeFonso, who works with the rec center, he works with a lot of our teenagers, and they were out doing some island exploration, and lo and behold, they found it. And he came to me and said, "What is this?" And I said, "It's a homesteader's grave that was on the North Ridge, and it's the only tombstone that we have, even though there are, oh, there it is, that's my picture. There are at least 12 and as many as 20 graves on the North Ridge, just on the North Ridge. So this was a very popular cemetery. And for years, I didn't know who William Pearde was, Pearde. Couldn't find him, couldn't Google him, couldn't find him in any of our books. And I mentioned it to Betty Anholt, and within, 2 days? She had his whole history. He was from Ireland, and he had emigrated here. We don't know where he came from, maybe from the Midwest or something, but he was married. He had children here. One of his daughters married one of the Barnes sons, William Barnes, and so they actually had a very good life here. They were homesteaders, and his property was approximately at the head of where we go into Ding Darling Wildlife Sanctuary. So it's just an example that history is out there. We just have to find it. It's just amazing that Betty went into the census for 1900 and pulled that out. Great.
So cool. Okay, thank you. And at this point, we were supposed to say, if any of you have an interest in doing this kind of research, there is more digging to be done. So, you could do that. We move now to the Reed family, and there are a number of Reed graves there. You will see them. William H. Reed, William Haskell Reed, was born in 1830. Some sources say 1829. He joined the Union Navy late in the war. He was captain of a brig, and he and his grown son, Will, who we'll see a picture of in just a minute, he and his grown son came down here. They liked it, and so they purchased land to homestead. And once they got a house built on that land, they sent for the rest of the family to come back. Now, that you will notice that this whole talk is peppered with sad things about people's medical issues, women dying in childbirth, families being bereft. This was one of those families where they had two families. And so through the miracle of the internet, this is not a Sanibel grave. That's in Deer Isle, Maine. And those are two little girls who belonged to Will and Lucy Reed, and two little girls that they left up there. And it was, and they came down here, and you think, leaving Maine, I know a lot of people who leave Maine for our winters down here, and so it must have been very promising. However, less than a year after they were down here, Gene Reed fell off his sailboat and died in a sailing accident. They said his mother was heartbroken, his mother Lucy, and I just want, this is confusing, but I just want, the two little girls, the first two, are not buried on Sanibel. Those are the ones in Deer Isle. And then you have William Sumner Reed. He was the one who, if you tour the village, he was a postmaster for 44 years. They lived down on the bay. Eugene Grant, and then Lucy Hayes, the daughter named after her mother, who you will hear more about. But, they said she died of a broken heart. And we move now and we see the Rettingers, and this is a more contemporary one. Deb remembers the Rettingers, and she will tell us about these graves that are there in the Pioneer Cemetery.
Well, I just wanted to say that Joe Redinger was one of our postal delivery guys, and just a nice person. His wife worked at Bailey's when it was on the bayfront there. But he was a Navy veteran that didn't know how to swim. And literally, he was out on his boat going with a friend to Boca Grande and fell over and drowned. So we have so many drownings here. I'm sorry if we'll bore you with that, but a lot of people didn't know how to swim in the early days. I'm not sure why, but he was one of them. And Cookie was his daughter, and my brother and I went to school with her. She was born with a congenital heart issue and really only made it to the age of 10. And it was just a very sad situation, and something that probably was meaningful to my brother and I, because we didn't know that there were kids that were sickly or were born with issues. We were kind of sheltered, and these were people that were here on the island, and her brother is still alive to my knowledge and lives up in northern Florida.
And one obituary we found, and I just thought this was sad, said that the pallbearers for Cookie were going to be boys from St. Michael's Church. And I just, those details. A lot of untimely death. And that brings us to the next one, Isaac Newton Rutland. The great big stone that is up there. And I was going to read you a passage from Betty's book, but I'll do a synopsis of it. Isaac Newton Rutland was the little brother of Clarence Rutland, who lived in the Rutland house on Periwinkle for years and years. The Rutland family, as I mentioned early in the introduction, came down here after their entire, all their groves were wiped out in the frost and winter of 1894, 1895. They came down here, and the whole story is a fascinating story, and I'll tell you a little more when we get farther onto his father. But they think that it was either gallbladder or appendix or something. He was very sick. He went over to Fort Myers. They performed surgery, and that was pre-penicillin days, and he died. And he belonged to this order of the Modern Woodmen. I think it was the Tarpon chapter of the Modern Woodmen, and the gravestone shows a tree cut short with branches. So he was cut short in life. And after the stone was put up, they had a memorial ceremony. What was the ship that they chartered?
On the Gladys, I think.
Okay,
It was either the Gladys or the Dixie.
I think it was the Dixie. They chartered the whole boat. 150 people came over. They had a band from Fort Myers, and they gave him, and then they had a picnic, and they gave him a grand send-off. So, you know, that's, yeah, sad things. And then the one that everyone wants to know about, you know, people leave toys there for baby whiles. We have children could be up to 2 years old, and they would call them a baby. Or even older than that, and we're not sure. And Betty and Deb, you know, knew a lot of Wileses, but there's no one of the right age. So we think it might have been a young couple who lost a child, maybe married just for a short amount of time. But you know, those were very different days with the mores of children being born. So okay, then we're going to move. And Betty's going to take us out to Woodring Point and John B. Daniels.
Okay, so this is a more modern aerial, of course, just showing you Woodring Point. The Woodrings, of course, were among our first homesteaders back in 1888. And the Woodring family, there were a number of children. Sam Woodring, who would be the second of the Sams. There are, I think, about 6 Sams altogether. Ken?
More than I'd like to.
Yeah, that's for sure. But anyway, Sam Woodring was married to Aurora Woodring, and his sister was Flora Sanibel Woodring, who was the first white child born on Sanibel in 1889. They went through the 1910 hurricane in the cottage next door, the McCullough Clubhouse, that had just been built that year, along with Aurora's 2 young children, young girls, Laura and Helen. That was in 1910. And in 1912, this story came up. I'll let you read that. So the little girl who had just gone through a tremendous storm, basically alone with 2 young women trying to protect them, fell into the water and drowned. Again, yet another drowning here on the island. John Daniels, who married Lucy Reed, the daughter in the Reed family, died in a different way. All of these people were buried at the Sanibel Cemetery that we're discussing so far. But John Daniels had a farm just up Bailey Road near the main road, perhaps there where the Standard Station is today, right in that general vicinity in any case. And he and a farmhand were working on a wagon, and evidently some sort of spat or argument began, and there was alcohol involved. And the farmhand picked up a shotgun and shot him. And Lucy came running out of the house, and the shotgun was pointed at her. But cooler heads, too many. Cooler heads intervened, including Frank Bailey, who was Justice of the Peace, and he was taken, the shooter was taken into town, a man named Chauncey. Second-degree murder, I think, was what ended up being. Now, Lucy, we'll go on. There we go. Lucy later brought what was called the Floating Hotel, which was for tarpon fishermen. It, from about 1900 on, was being towed around. It was basically a barge with a hotel built on top of it for the fishermen, so they were right at their fishing hole as soon as they got up in the morning. And she bought it and brought it on shore next to the Reed homestead and opened the Sanibel house, which is what we're seeing here with evidently some of her children there. In the portrait of the family, you saw a baby sitting on John Daniels' lap, and he was Haskell Daniels. He later worked for the Bailey family at the Sanibel Packing Company on the dock, and also worked at the lighthouse. During the 1926 hurricane, he, with his pregnant wife, attempted to drive from the Bailey dock up to the lighthouse to send a telegraph to Frank Bailey, because the Bailey family was in North Carolina on a vacation, to let them know that the store had toppled into the bay. He only got about halfway, and the car broke down. The waves took away the car, basically. The hulk of it remained on the beach for several years afterwards.
So, and those of you who have been around Sanibel a long time know this, but this action was taking place when you cross the causeway. If you're coming onto the island and look to the right, there was the Bailey store, there were the Reed family, and they had some big buildings. The seniors had a house, and there was Will Reed, the son had a house, and then farther down was the Mayer compound. But there was a lot of construction all along that beach.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
okay. All right, and we have a number of others, and there are people we don't know there. And so, but this is who we know who is buried in the cemetery. Okay, and now we're going to move to West Gulf, to Gray Gables, 1898, the home of the Letitia Nutt family.
This is a picture from 1898, but they arrived in 1889, and it was a family of a Confederate widow and her brother and her mother-in-law and her 3 adult daughters. And she was said to be of strong spirit, which you could say she was very stubborn. And she and her daughters did start the United
United Daughters.
United Daughters of the Confederacy, which was a group of, there's a lot of them in the South, and that was the Fort Myers group, and they started that. But that's how connected they were with the Confederacy, because when she married and had her 3 children, the war started, and her husband was an officer in the Confederate Army, and they followed him around, literally camped and followed him around to every battlefield. And even when he was captured, she stayed with him in the prison while he was a prisoner. Yes, and
With the babies.
yeah,
The children were like 2, 3, 5, something like that.
right. Fortunately, I think he was only imprisoned for like 5 months, and he was exchanged for a Union prisoner, and he went back to fight again. She did write a book called Courageous Journey, and it chronicles everything that they went through, and it just shows she really was strong of spirit. But they went back after the war, and he was an attorney in Louisiana. They moved from Kentucky to Louisiana, and he passed away. And a couple years later, their house burnt down. And so she was a widow with these 3 daughters, and she wasn't sure what to do, but she knew the barns that you saw had come here, the evangelical preacher. And he told her, come on down, there's land for the taking. And so this whole family, I think the only one who didn't claim 160 acres was the mother-in-law. They all had a claim, and so there's a large section of land that belonged to the Nutt family. Does anybody here live in Lake Murax? Well, Lake Murax, if you know West Gulf Drive, that was part of the Nutt homestead. And of course, we still have the cemetery and the land that's there that we can show is part of the historic. There's the cemetery. I'm sorry. Yeah, and they were just they're all buried there for the most part. Not the husband because he died when they were up in Louisiana, but everybody's there. And they were also very fond of their dogs, so we have 2 dogs buried there as well. There's one on the stairs there, you can see. So this was just how you did it in the South. You had a family cemetery, and everybody would be interred there. Now, what was sad, I think, about this family is that she was such a Confederate that she wouldn't let her daughters marry unless they married a Confederate. And then, even then, they had to be of the right stature. And so none of the daughters could marry at all, even though they found suitors, because the mother was so stubborn. And she passed away, and finally, one of the daughters, whose name was Nanny, married a man whose name was Nels Holt. She married him probably middle to late life. They married, and he had admired her from afar for decades. So one of them got to marry. And then when he passed away, he got to be in the cemetery as well.
And there is, the people who are buried there. You notice the last entry at the bottom, Prissy, a family dog, dates unknown, and then Betty.
And yet another of the dogs, Katie, who was the best dog.
So we had a discussion about Katie, and you thought Katie was a German Shepherd, maybe?
In 1960, the property had been sold to the Episcopal Women's Retreat, I think, but in 1960 it sold back to a distant member of the family. And we knew them, and their last name was Martin, and Jerry Martin would stop by our house occasionally, or we would stop up there, and he had a German Shepherd. And so I often wonder if Katie was a German Shepherd, because I can't come up with a name anymore. But that's when I knew I wanted a German Shepherd.
Okay, I'm going to try this clicker again so I can get to my books over here. Okay. Reverend Viren and Othman Rutland, you can walk up to their memorial marker. If you go to where She Sells Seashells is, it's almost in their parking lot. And the memorial there, okay, the memorial there is Reverend Viren and Othman Rutland. And Reverend Viren was born in Sweden. They emigrated to the U.S. when he was 26. He taught in Maine. He was in poor health, and the doctor suggested they should move south. So he came to Sanibel with his wife and 5 children. They homesteaded along Periwinkle to the bay. And in 1890, he died of TB, and the family moved back. And I want to read you, this is from the Seychelles Islands book, just because ever since I've been a little girl, I just get so sad about these things that happen to people. And this is another one. Okay. They built a small frame house along the main road, but their years on Sanibel were not happy ones. Their daughter Estella was only 10 years old when she was badly burned and had to be in bed for a very long time. She had been trying, 10 years old, ready? She had been trying to get a fire going when a bottle of kerosene exploded in her hand. So, there danger from fire, danger from disease, danger from accident, danger from drowning. We live in pretty good times. That's one thing that we know. And then his wife, who you can see right there, that's the welcome kiosk. Right there, you can read their signage in there that talks about both Reverend Viren and Othman Rutland. Othman Rutland, okay. Othman Rutland's family, they're the ones who came down from Apopka, Florida, lived here. He did not live too long after they moved here, and she was left with the 5 small children. Irene Rutland was a strong and spirited woman. We had a lot of those. She raised turkeys to support the family. They moved into the Viren's house and lived there. And it wasn't until later that the Rutland house was built along there. But as I mentioned in the introduction, we're going to have a Twilight Talk in January. This says that Othman Rutland was born in England. But I don't think that's right, because Othman, there's a footnote about, he was the first husband of Irene, and according to the book of the authors coming down here, he was born in Florida. So that's a question we will ask the author who comes down. And I don't know, Betty, could Clarence Rutland have told a whopper about his father being born in England?
That sounds very likely.
Or he didn't know. So anyway, Reverend and Viren came down here. They started very early. They were in 1884, and there was some exception. It was a special provision to homestead, a preemption act of 1841. So he was down here before the island was open to homesteading. So there have always been legal workarounds for folks. Okay, and then we come to the most fascinating, I think, burial on Sanibel. Betty, can you tell us about Oliver Bowen?
Okay, Oliver Bowen was a Mississippi riverboat pilot who was actually quite famous in his time. He was also impressed into the Confederate Navy and won a couple of battles, but his boat was the only one that survived the battles. So he very shortly got himself out of the Confederate Navy. His nephews and cousins all looked up to him, and one of his nephews was a close friend, lifelong friend of Samuel Clemens. And Samuel Clemens, who of course is Mark Twain, also looked up to Oliver as what they wanted to do when they grew up. This is where the Bowens homesteaded up near Wolford, right at the base where you go into the sanctuary now, approximately. But Bowen, after the Civil War, his wife died, and the one child that they had was turned over to his wife's parents. And he went to South America. He went to take a boat down to the Orinoco River in Venezuela. He spent several decades down there, and in 1878 married a woman and had 3 children down there before he heard about homesteading on Sanibel, probably from a brother who lived in New York and was involved with real estate. And he packed up a boat and his family with lumber and slate roof tiles and agave plants, and came up to Sanibel and homesteaded. This is his burial site, and this property in general is where his homestead was. Oliver always said that when he was to be buried, he wanted to be buried in his well, which doesn't make any sense at all, but there it is. This is his gravestone, and it was done as he asked. They actually had to open the well a little further to fit the coffin in the space, and place the gravestone. In later years, the gravestone went on to the well. Once Oliver and his family got to Sanibel, they had one more child, a boy named Albert, who claimed he was the first white boy born on Sanibel. And his mother, Marie dos Santos, who we see here, was basically working as a housekeeper for Island Inn, growing vegetables, taking eggs to town. She was working hard to keep everything going. Oliver died before they had entirely proved up the homestead plot, so she continued that and got it patented. And as soon as that happened, the son that had been born pre-Civil War came swooping down and claimed his inheritance, packed up Mary and baby Albert, and sent them back to Trinidad, which is where they had been living, and sent the other children to other relatives and sold the property. So her work was basically negated. Later on, Albert, the baby, and she returned to the United States and moved out to California, where one of their children was. And when she died, she was placed in the Forest Lawn Cemetery, which we know today as the Cemetery of the Stars. So there is that.
Deb, are you set to tell us about Wolford? I'll pop over here so I can push these slides along.
I will try. As I said earlier, the Wolford Cemetery, none of us have really seen much of it. This is a picture I took recently, wandering off the 14th tee of the golf course out at the sanctuary, and I think I had it right. There was a picture that we have that was taken about, I think I got it from an employee of the city of Sanibel. It was taken at least 10 years ago, and there were some white crosses that were still on the site. But, well, we'll get to it. That's fine. Anyways, if you don't know Wolford, it was a large farming community. It was a little later than the east end of the island. People kind of homesteaded a little bit later, and a lot of families lived there. When I think of them, I try to think of the D's first, because it was Dones, Dwight, and Dinkins. And Mr. Dinkins was the one who donated the property for this cemetery. And it was, I think as I said, it was dedicated. So we had a lot of people there. These are the ones we know that were there. Henderson is a name that everyone knows if you're up from that area, because there's Henderson Road. Mr. Dwight was very prominent, and he had an ongoing feud with, help me out here, the postmistress.
Oh, Dunn.
Jenny Dunn. Jenny Dunn and Dwight, they would fight about what the name of the post office was going to be. And finally, a post office person from the government came and spent the night. And when he left, they said, well, are we going to call it Dwight or are we going to call it Doan? And he said, no, we're calling it Wolford. Nobody knows where it came from. We think it's a German background, but he just solved the fight right there.
And this is a ghostly presentation because 2 slides have mysteriously disappeared. And one of them is the photo of the crosses.
Right, okay.
So,
I saw them, they were there.
and then the other one is a photo of Ginny.
Oh, of Ginny Down, yeah.
And
She too was also strong of spirit. She wore pants, which wasn't done. She wore pants, but she wore a skirt over them. But still, for that day, she was very progressive. Yeah. There was something else I wanted.
seances.
Yeah, there was a group of people there, and the Dones were part of that I don't know if the Dwights were. Another family, I think, named Robinson was there, but they came there together to form a spiritual group, and they would have seances at their homes, and they were the type of people that had their coffins in their homes to be ready just in case they needed them. So, but that was Wolford. Wolford was very odd. It was so far from the lighthouse. If you think about walking, you didn't walk it. You might, if you had a mule, you could ride a mule, but it would still take you half the day. So Wolford in itself was kind of an odd little neighborhood that had a school at one time, and they had a little store there and all, and it did well until finally, the storms that ruined our farmland for everywhere else ruined it in the Wolford area too.
And now we move to the last part of our program, the random ones. We've covered all of the cemeteries and graveyards and family plots. Skulls in the garden, the skeleton at the village, yellow fever victims, and then some unmarked graves. And we go first of all.
So this is Sam Ellis and Commodore Reed, who is no relation to the Reeds that we've mentioned before. The Ellis homestead was along the south side of Tarpon Bay, basically pretty much where the Marine Lab is today. And Commodore Reed, you know of Commodore Creek if you've ever gone kayaking or canoeing in Tarpon Bay. Sam Ellis had a garden and dug up some skulls. And the news of that, basically they were Native American skulls, the Calusa as we know them today. And that word spread because the archaeologist Frank Hamilton Cushing was involved in checking out Marco Island and the rather famous sites a little further south of us here. So he stopped by and saw Sam, and they talked about archaeology, and Sam also pointed him in other directions where he might find evidence of Native American just habitation. This is basically just one of the archaeological digs up on the Captiva Mound, which is on South Seas Plantation, or South Seas Island Resorts as it's known today. The skeleton at the village. Does anyone remember the skeleton in the Rutland house? We've got one. Yeah, Ellie Dormer noticed something sticking out of the sand not too far from her house one day when someone with, I don't know whether it was a bobcat or one of these mechanical earth movers, was working around the property, and eventually she and a number of other people dug an almost complete skeleton out of the land on her property. This was about a decade before the museum became a museum. And when the Rutland House was moved here, they decided to display it, laid it out on sand with some decorative shells around it in a room that was dedicated to archaeology, our Indian presence, geology, that sort of thing, all together. And it was there for a good probably 10 or 12 years. Over the course of time, they had a number of doctors had come through and examined it, if you will, and they decided that it was a woman. It was approximately 50 years old. It was Indian, various. And then one doctor, an orthopedist, came in and said, that elbow bone and that wrist bone are misplaced. They've got them in the wrong place. Do you want me to fix it for you? And he did. Eventually, though, it was decided that maybe that wasn't exactly the best thing to do to have a skeleton laid out. It was laid out in a prone position, not a flex position. This is simply a demonstration from Buck Key of another skeleton that was found up there.
It was a different time.
This was,
Are you
yeah,
ready for your favorite
it was
slide?
definitely a different time, but yeah, things changed. So I wanted to put some flesh on the bones, if you will. The spiritual life of the Calusa, this painting, which was done by Merrill Clark from the University of Florida, is called Reflections. And it demonstrates what the Indians, the Calusa, felt spiritually in terms of their three souls. One was the reflection in water, which you can see. The second was the shadow, which is to my side. And the third was what you saw in the pupil of a person's eye. And those three souls, when a person died, the first two souls would disappear, but the third soul, the soul in the pupil of the eye, was permanent, which, looking at it from a different way, was why they poked the eyes out of their enemies.
Okay. Yeah, when we started this program, Deb said, who's going to come to three old ladies talking about dead people? I said, well, there is some good stuff here. So, and they do know that.
Okay, and this is, you may be aware of the fact that the submarine telegraph cable went across the eastern end of Sanibel. It stretched from the mainland at Punta Rasa over Sanibel and down to Havana, Cuba, also going over Key West. This is an illustration, I think it was in Harper's Weekly, of them dragging the cable to the shoreline at Key West in the next one. But this is a picture from one of the cable ships. You can kind of see the cable running up towards the men on the upper deck. And this cable was laid between Havana and then north till they reached Punta Rasa and connected it to the mainland. Havana at the time was going through a yellow fever epidemic. And so when they were laying the cable at Havana, they were, within this difficult time. They brought the cable over to Key West and then brought the second set of cable from Key West to Sanibel and to Punta Rasa. But by the time they got to Punta Rasa, many on the ship, it was called the Narva, were ill. On these ships, about 20 people worked in the cable side, which is what we're seeing. And you can click to the other one if you like. There's just a close-up. And there were a like number that were operating the ship itself, both sail and coal-powered ship. But it was the yellow fever attacked the cable people, and more than half of them died from yellow fever. When they got to Punta Rasa, many of them went ashore and spent the night in barracks there. This was 1867, as I mentioned. and they had a very rough night. When they came back to the ship, one man had died, and they put him on the boat that moved them back and forth and took him back to shore. We don't know whether the shore was Sanibel or whether the shore was Ponderosa, but they took him back to bury him. By the time it got back to the ship, a second guy had died, and they took him away, and a third one the following day. Then they set sail for Key West, and by the time they got to Key West, they had a number of people who were dying, and they put them in the hospital at Key West. And then they continued to sail on. Go ahead.
Okay.
And the chief engineer, the man who did the inspection of the cable as it went off the boat, had died. And at age 21, he was buried at sea. He was the youngest son of his family. These were Englishmen. And his older brother was William Crookes. And William later became Sir William Crookes. He was quite a famous chemist and part of the Royal Society in England. And in later years spent a lot of time with both seances and palm readers trying to reach his younger brother. So more spiritualism.
Oops. Cuban snacks.
And then, of course, we lost Cuban fishermen as well, both in storms or rough water. This is a postcard that's pretty famous that shows quite a number of them here in our bay. But they also came ashore. They came to the Bailey dock. And this is a picture of some of them interacting with some of our residents, particularly the Sawyer family. There were several girls in the Sawyer family. This picture was in about 1925. We have additional pictures of these girls climbing the masts in the Smacks boat, and them picnicking together and that sort of thing. So there was a lot of good interaction with Cuba and South Florida right up until the time that Castro took over that nation.
And I'm sorry that isn't a better image. I'm guessing they were good-looking young men. And, you know, to the girls living on the island, that would be something. So, how many people in here have been to the Captiva Cemetery? If you have not, it is the best cemetery in the state. It's absolutely lovely. And we have things we could tell you, but we are coming to the end of our time. Captiva Island Historical Society is going to do a presentation on their cemetery in January. And after, was it Helene or Milton, or which one was the one that washed them with sand so badly? Yeah, they've cleaned up quite a bit. And before that, you did an inventory. So it's a fascinating cemetery. I encourage you to go there and learn the story of the Brainerd family. Anne Brainerd's story is just one for the books. And the story of her brother Gordon Brainerd is another sad one. And we see Hattie Brainerd Gore and her husband Alvin, and
No relation to the former vice president, by the way.
no, and Hattie lost more children than any woman should ever. So that is there. So can you read that, or should I read it to you? Can you read it? From Florence Fritz's book. It's very... So it was on the islands here and there, Spaniards, Indians, Spanish Indians, Cubans, homesteaders, strangers washed ashore in the dim past. Known and unknown lie in peace and even in the waters surrounding. They left a legacy of love and laughter, echoes of happy ways and days that belong to the islands forever. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you don't have dinner plans and have to escape, we have time if you would like to ask them questions about cemeteries or graves, or Betty can answer any question you have about the islands, and Deb, a lot of them. So,
Sounds like a challenge.
like a challenge? Yeah, give her a challenge.
I'd like to remind people that homesteading meant that you had a lot of land that you were living on. And if you passed away, your family was going to probably just put you in a family plot behind the barn. So I will tell you that we're on Dunlop Road here. Well, Mr. Dunlop is somewhere here on his homestead. But that was very common. Yeah, you didn't always have a chance to be put in a cemetery.
Well, you mentioned very early on, I think it was one of your slides, you had something that said ghost tombstone. What did that?
That was the Pear Day headstone. And when I was a teenager, Susie Amon and I were kind of adventurous, and we would ride our bikes at night and what have you, but we would go down to the cemetery because you like spooking yourself, and we could see it in the distance. We could see this outline of a headstone, but during the day we would go look for it and we never found it because it was all overgrown. It was a lot of sawgrass and what have you, and so the pathways weren't there. So lo and behold, as I've finally reached the ripe old age that I can go out and trudge around and they put pathways through there, I finally find the ghost headstone.
But who named that? Where did you get that name?
Oh, I just called it the ghost headstone. It was an exceptional stone, though. It had the crypt cover, so there was a cement piece that covered the actual coffin area. It was very high end for its day. It really was exceptional.
We talked a lot about that family because William Peard, or Pearday, or however you said it, he was 7 years old during the famine in Ireland, and he came over here and obviously purchased land. So it'd be interesting to know where in Ireland he came from, and what the family circumstances were, and why he left it off.
I'm sure Betty's going to research all of that and come back and tell us.
He had a house in Alva, they said, or a farm in Alva.
Yeah, you had found that.
That was in the census, I think, that said he had property in Alva, but we know he had property here too. So, and the same thing with Nels Holt, the gentleman who married Nanny, the one sister that got to get married. He had property in Alva too. So people moved around.
They did.
Yeah.
Alva was very popular with people in Sanibel, and there was a lot of interaction back and forth.
This is the beach house? Was this their beach house then, basically? They came from Alva out to here.
Yeah, maybe so.
Okay, well, thank you. If any of you wants to ask these folks questions, but thank you for being our premier audience for our Twilight Talks here at Shorehaven. And enjoy your evening and come back in December, please.
Thank you.